creating cultural awareness and understanding. This is Culture Clique. Culture Clique is written and produced by KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University.
Living in a river town like Winona means plenty of opportunities for enjoying the outdoors and viewing a variety of wildlife. Whether you like to hike the local trails, kayak the backwaters of the Mississippi, or enjoy some time in Levee Park, Winona has something to offer for everyone. But living on the river next to such natural beauty also means that we have to be good stewards and take care of the natural resources around us. The City of Winona has an agreement with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do just that in an area called Aghaming Park and Reserve. Aghaming is enjoyed by many for fishing, kayaking, or canoeing, and it is especially good for birding. Today, we hear from Richie Swanson, president of the Winona Bird Club, about Aghaming Park and Reserve and the agreement between the city and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm Bill Stoneberg with president of the Winona Bird Club, Richie Swanson, on Culture Clique. We're here today to talk about an agreement made between the City of Winona and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about the Aghaming Wildlife Area.
Well, it's officially called Aghaming Park, a John Latch Preserve.
Okay. Is it okay if I just refer to it as Aghaming?
Yes.
Okay, that's kind of a long title.
Yeah, and that's an Ojibwa word which means across the water. Okay. So it's very pertinent for Winona because it was a gift from John Latch that's across the water from Winona.
Oh, that's perfect. That is perfect. And so Aghaming itself is, you go across the bridge from Winona and it'd be on your right? Is that?
Well, if you start at Highway 54 to Wisconsin and you go across the interstate bridge and then across Latch Island, then it's downriver from Murtis Slough. It's west of Trempealeau Refuge, and it's islands and sloughs that last all the way to across from Homer. It's 1,100 acres.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's
a large area.
Yes.
Oh, wow. That is, and that's funny because I never really knew about it until, you sent me some information here.
Yeah, and it is across the wagon bridge. That's what makes it unique. It's very accessible for a floodplain forest and for Mississippi River Islands. People can walk to it. People can bike to it.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. For some reason, I was thinking you had a canoe or boat to it or something.
Well, there is a canoe trail.
Oh, nice. Well, that's another cool thing we should talk about. But first off, there was an agreement signed last year in 2018, but it's between the City of Winona and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. What does the agreement really mean for Aghaming and the city?
Well, it gives the city the help of Fish and Wildlife in managing both the conservation and the public access of the 1,100 acres of floodplain forest and wetlands. Okay. It sets some parameters. It will also provide what Aghaming has never had, which is law enforcement from the Fish and Wildlife Service. It will set some ground rules. It'll keep vehicles out of the woods, which is also desperately needed in Aghaming. So the mayor appointed a task force this spring, which I am on, and a few other citizens are on, and we are coming up with a management plan to recommend to council. And the council will vote on it several months from now. It'll be a while. We've just met twice, and I don't know how long the process will go on. I mean, Fish and Wildlife has their own standards, and it specifies in the agreement that pretty much what Fish and Wildlife does on the Upper Mississippi Refuge is what will happen at Aghaming. Okay. But we'll make the best recommendations that we can to kind of supplement those.
Right. And even though the agreement was signed a year ago, it sounds like it's important for people to know about right now because things are starting to move forward, right? Yeah,
things will move forward. I mean, the Fish and Wildlife has already almost completed a forest inventory at Aghaming, which is important because hundreds of ash trees are dying in the forest, and this will enable Fish and Wildlife to make the best decisions possible about what species to plant in place of the ashes.
Oh,
If you
okay.
just let it happen on its own, unfortunately, exotic species will move in. Buckthorn and Reed's Canaria grass will move in, and you won't get a forest. That's happening all up and down the upper Mississippi. So now that's one of the great things about the agreement. Fish and Wildlife is able to put its resources into sustaining the forest at Aghaming.
Oh, wow. That's great then.
Yes.
You know, I mean, so in the past, is the city was solely responsible for this area?
Yes,
Okay.
the city and the off-roaders and the off-road
off-roaders.
vehicles, and there's been environmental activists who've stood up for the area too. The Winona Bird Club and also Mississippi River Revival, when it was active, the Green Party advocated for Aghaming. So there's a lot of fishermen who stand up for Aghaming too.
Right, right. Okay. Well, and speaking of the Winona Bird Club, which you're president of, you guys are celebrating this agreement with an event next Wednesday, September 4th at 7 p.m. at the Winona Friendship Center. What can we expect to see at the event?
Okay, well, the event is called Beautifully Abundant Birds I Desire, and it's a PowerPoint presentation of 5 months in the field at Aghaming that I spent in 2007. I wrote a blog called Riverbird Blog. It's, if you Google it, it still comes up. It's at my website, richieswanson.com. And I focused on bird activities, breeding bird activity, migrating bird activity, ecology of the river. And I wrote about conservation issues as they came appearing with the birds. So I put together a narrative of that 5 months experience in the fall, and I call it Beautifully Abundant Birds I Desire, which is a phrase I took from an English translation of the Navajo night chant, which is a healing ritual. And it goes like this. It says, "Happily may I walk. Happily abundant vegetation I desire. Happily in earthly beauty may I walk. Beautifully will I possess again. Beautifully birds, beautifully joyful birds." And then at the end of the chant, it invokes future generations. "With the beauty all around me, may I walk. Thus it will be beautiful. Thus walk in beauty, my grandchild." And that's kind of my vision for nature in general, but also specifically for Aghaming Park. And the reason the Bird Club is celebrating that is because the partnership with Fish and Wildlife is that the partnership is going to take steps to keep Aghaming beautiful and unspoiled, especially by off-road vehicles.
Right, right.
And the trash dumping and other things that have happened there.
Yeah. It's it's a shame when things like that happen. But hopefully we can curb that now.
I think so, and things have changed. And the Flyway Bike Trail is going to go on the cement road, or it's also called the Wagon Bridge Road. And so the Flyway Bicycle Trail will go across the Wagon Bridge, and then it'll just skirt Aghaming on the north edge, and that should bring some law and order to the place too.
Right.
Yeah.
Having people out there that care about it.
It's been kind of a lawless land. If you wanted to dump your trash, if you wanted to take a tree, you took a tree.
Wow.
Actually, if you wanted to cut a tree so your vehicle could have access to the woods, you did that too. Another issue that was resolved is the power company did maintenance right where a rare hawk, a red-shouldered hawk, which I first discovered nesting at Aghaming in 1994. The power company did maintenance right beneath the nest, and actually the hawk abandoned nestlings once. It's kind of a sensitive hawk, but now there's a gate, and the power company stays out of the red-shouldered hawk's territory during breeding season, and it comes and it does its maintenance during the winter. And that's important because a lot of people, they ask, well, how can you solve those kind of problems? But if you take some wisdom to some management guidelines, a lot of times there are solutions. You just have to know what's happening and how to protect what's there.
Right. And I think that's probably one of the important things about this agreement is then now we can find those solutions by working with the Fish and Wildlife Service and implement things, correct?
Yeah, and we're also going to work. There's really it's kind of a nameless territory. Like I came up with names I call one trail Prothonotary Trail because prothonotary warblers, which come from mangrove swamps in Central America and nest in stumps in Aghaming, they're plentiful along this old dike, and I call that Prothonotary Trail. The red-shouldered hawk catches frogs to feed its nestlings in what I called red-shouldered marsh. The osprey recovered from the DDT problems and first came back to Aghaming in 1991. So where it came back, I call that Osprey Marsh. And the committee will come up with some common names to use so people can know where they are. Right now, there's Sam Gordy's Slough is the name that's most known for Aghaming. It's a narrow slough along the railroad tracks where a lot of fishermen fish, and that'll stay Sam Gordy's Slough. But that's about the only name that people knew for the place.
Right. Do you think that maybe they might use some of the names you've come up with?
Well, I'm advocating for it.
Cool.
There's also a very rare warbler called the cerulean warbler that comes from old growth in Peru, old-growth mountain forests, and it breeds in Aghaming, or did breed during the 90s. I documented it from 93 to 98, and I call those woods cerulean corners. And that's another thing that the forest inventory and forest regeneration will help, because cottonwoods, as they're allowed to exist now, do not regenerate in the water conditions in the Mississippi because it's a channelized river, and the ceruleans depend on tall trees like the cottonwoods. So Fish and Wildlife will be able to plant cottonwoods and keep those tall trees in the forest.
Oh, cool.
And that's a goal up and down the Mississippi.
Right, and this is going to help. I want to go back to the poem or the verses from the chant.
It can be called a poem. Yeah,
the poem, because it ended with. I don't remember the exact line, but it's something about grandchildren.
Thus walk in beauty, my grandchild.
My grandchild. So that implies, that we're going to keep this around for future generations.
Exactly. That's the goal. That's the goal. Access plus protection for future generations.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. So it sounds like a great place for birding.
I've birded it since 1994. I could go on and on. There's 25 different warblers that I've seen use Aghaming. There's about 34 wood warblers, which are long-distance migrants. Mostly they come from South America and Central America, and some breed in Aghaming, like the cerulean and the redstart and the prothonotary warbler. And some keep going on, like there's a blackpoll warbler that actually flies 6,500 miles one way from the Amazon forest all the way to northwestern Alaska to breed.
Oh, wow.
And then when it returns, it flies all the way across eastern Canada and catches a wind on the Atlantic Ocean and actually has been recorded to fly 88 straight hours all the way.
Wow.
All the way to the Caribbean.
And I think driving just a couple hours is a chore.
yeah. So that's a blackpoll. So there's lots of miracles that happen at Aghaming. There's a healthy beaver population. This year the beavers built, because the water came up so much, the beavers built lodges on top of lodges on top of lodges. They built lodges on top of dikes. They built lodges on top of fallen trees. But they did have kits, and they were basking lazily in the sun at the highest level of the rivers. There's an otter population over there. There's lots of soft-shell turtles and snapping turtles. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of diversity there.
Cool. And like we said, it's great for birding, but it's also, you mentioned fishermen, if people want to hike out there, since you can walk, to it.
Yeah, people get their northerns during the flood right behind the wagon bridge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And they get their sunnies in Sam Gordy's slough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
So it's really something that, lots of people in the Winona area can enjoy, and as long as we take care of it. And
they will be able to hike to Swamp White Oaks. That actually the biologist from Winona State here, Carol Jefferson, aged years ago as being over 200 years old. Some of the oldest trees in the floodplains, way before the dams, and people will be able to hike and see those swamp white oaks, which are also struggling to regenerate in the channelized river. The soil stays too wet in the channelized river for the traditional forest to grow.
Right.
So that creates a management challenge for people who want to keep the forest as it was, or even to keep a forest in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So swamp white oaks pretty much, there are some places that are high and dry enough at Aghaming where swamp white oaks are regenerating on their own, but there's also a lot of places on the Upper Miss where they're replanted with the express goal of keeping the acorns for things like red-headed woodpeckers and deer and squirrels and other mast-eating wildlife with the intent that will keep the oaks in the woods.
Right. And you've mentioned the channelized river a couple times now. And I think that's a really important point, that, we do need to manage these areas because we've altered how it naturally exists. So, management's very important, isn't it?
One of the first things I learned when I did breeding bird censuses in association with Fish and Wildlife. And one of the first things I learned from Fish and Wildlife was that the river here is more like lakes than it is a natural flowing river. Mm-hmm. The way that the floodplain forest used to regenerate is you would get really low water in August and you would get mud flats. So cottonwoods would start to grow and river birch would start to grow, and then they'd hold the soil and you'd get a forest, that on that mud flat, and the mud flat would increase and the forest would increase. That doesn't really happen anymore because the water just doesn't get as low for as long as periods as it used to, and then when it gets high, it stays higher longer. Okay. So you have a different water ecology than you did before the dams. So that's one reason you need to manage, but mostly you need to manage because there's so many of us, and we love to use the river so much, whether it's to go fast in our boats or whether it's to go fast in our cars through the woods, or whether it's to burn a campfire and camp anywhere we want, or whether we need some people need a place to dump their trash. Management is important. And the other thing is, you can identify species that are declining. Like one thing I want to make sure I talk about is right here at Phelps Hall and in Winona State, only 20 years ago, nighthawks would fill the sky in the summer. They nested on the roof of this building and on the roofs of other buildings at Winona State and downtown, the car dealers down by the river. And they're virtually gone from Winona in my lifetime. They were around just 15 years ago, and they're not really around anymore. And that's probably due to, here it's probably related to the crow populations. Crows eat nighthawk chicks, and crows are plentiful, much more plentiful on campus than they were 20 years ago. But they eat insects, so there's probably a pesticide problem. They used to nest in prairies. Prairies are gone. Essentially, 98% of prairies are gone from the United States. So you can choose, like, not so much at Aghaming, but in other places in the refuge, we'll restore a prairie. So species like nighthawks have a traditional place to nest, a habitat where they have succeeded in the past. And that's the same thing that happens at Aghaming for other species.
Right. Okay. And just going back to the celebration next week, again, that's going to be Wednesday, September 4th at 7 p.m. at the Winona Friendship Center, and that is free and open to the public, correct?
Free and open to the public, and I should mention the photographers, the late Bill Draskowski, who was the president of the club for the year, and then our up-and-coming middle school student, Francis Cole, who already creeps up to cuckoos and takes wonderful pictures of them.
Wow.
Alan Blake Sheldon. All these people have great credits like National Geographic. Kay Shaw, Kathy Carlisle, Lisa Reed, Andy Nyhus, Howard Munson, who on his 95th birthday, here's a challenge, on his 95th birthday photographed rare warblers on prothonotary trails at Aghaming Park, and my partner Barbie Bell, who has helped greatly in the conservation of Aghaming.
Oh, that's great. So there's going to be a lot of great photos there.
A lot of great photos, and I'll answer any questions, and we'll do a narrative afterwards. You get free treats, free bars, free coffees. You can talk. You can join the club if you want. It's $20 for an individual, $30 for a family. And we meet through the winter through April, and we bring an environmental scientist or other program speaker in once a month to the Friendship Center. And then in May and other times we take a walk together.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Great. Now, will any of these photographers be at the event?
Most of them will be at the event.
Cool.
Yes.
So if anyone's got questions for them, they'll be there.
Yeah.
Oh, sounds great. So, I just have a couple of general questions, too. Like, in birding, how long have you been a birder, and how'd you get into it?
I came of age taking long-distance bicycle trips, and the birds were my neighbors. I had a roommate who was a biology student in 1976, and we watched some birds together one spring. And we also backpacked together on the Appalachian Trail, and we watched Cape May warblers and Blackburnian warblers and other things, and we were just learning all the songs. And I was just, as I started to backpack and take long-distance bicycle trips outdoors in the late 70s and early 80s, I was just enraptured by the miracle that's out there. Cool. And I had to know the source of every sound, so I made sure I identified every bird sound that I heard within possible. And then as I grew older, I did some bird work. I did breeding bird censuses here, and some duck counts and the Riverbird blog and other things. So it just became a kind of an automatic love of life.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, when you spend time out in nature, when you encounter things that you're unfamiliar with, a lot of times it sparks you to learn, more about it.
Yeah, and it also inspired me to know how to be quiet.
Oh, sure.
I'm from a busy suburb in Connecticut outside New York City. So the woods was always an attractive place for me. But once you need to pay a lot of attention to really understand what you're watching out there. So it really taught me to take a deep breath, calm myself, relax, just receive what's out there. Don't be in a hurry if possible, and just enjoy the miracle.
Right, exactly. I mean, I would encourage anyone to go out there and enjoy this area because it is beautiful. I've been out in parts of it, But speaking of stealth, I've always wondered, in birding, do you have to be real stealthy and quiet to be able to find these birds? Or?
It helps. I called a walk last spring when the warblers were really good. And we were going to go on Prothonotary Trail to see the prothonotary, who was a luminous gold warbler and was around. And about 25 or 30 people showed up. It was too many, and we didn't see the bird.
Right.
To be as quiet as possible is important. Birders are very social. There's a kind of a close balance. I bird a lot alone, and then I bird with groups too, and it's a different experience. But I've never gone out with another expert birder and not learned a lot from him. So, there's so much out there. There's infinite out there. And so there's a lot of smart people who are birders. So if you can go out with them, I guarantee you'll see something that you haven't seen before, or they'll tell you something or identify a sound
Right.
that you haven't identified before. So it works both ways.
Right.
But to keep your voices low, that's a good idea.
Okay.
And to walk slow.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Walk softly and carry binoculars.
Yeah. These days, use these days. Yep.
So the Mississippi River Valley is. It sounds like it's really good for birding.
Well,
you
this
know?
it's the vital flyway in the central United States.
Right.
There's about 300 species that use it. Aghaming alone has 8 bird species with protective legal designations.
Oh, wow.
It has 3 new eagles' nests. It used to support black terns, which are endangered in Wisconsin. Black terns still nest at Trempealeau Refuge. They fly across the railroad dike and catch small fish for what's called a fish flight display. They the males bring fish to females at the nests and do a little flutter display and drop it. And there's all kinds of events that happen in the Mississippi. As in the agreement, it recognizes that the Mississippi River is vital to the population of North American birds. So the birds naturally fly up the flyway. They have done it for centuries, and we provide some habitat. People think because we live where you can see floodplain forests on the river all the way up to the cities or all the way down to Dubuque, that the floodplain forest is a common thing, but we are the exception. Most of the floodplain forest in the world is gone. It's been developed, the cities to the edge of the river or agriculture to the edge of the river. But because Will Dilge formed the Upper Refuge in the 20s, we get to see all the floodplain forests that we have. So It's really rare habitat. It doesn't seem like it to us, but we live in nirvana as far as bird population is concerned.
Right. It really is a treasure to have here. And I think, it sounds like you can witness things in birds that you wouldn't normally see in other places, right?
That's really true. I can count on a good spring day. I have counted 23, 24 warblers, and people fly across continents to be able to do that. In Winona, you can walk across the wagon bridge, and you don't have to see 23 warblers to have a great day, but you can see all kinds of good warblers on a day in May, or you can listen to a brown thrasher who ornithologists say have an infinite vocabulary, and he mimics all kinds of birds out there, will sing his heart out at dawn. So the miracle's really out there for Winona. And the potential that Winona wants for Aghaming is because it's so close to schools, is that its educational potential is really high. That doesn't mean a school or a building over there. Right. It just means that someday you can get students over there and have a hands-on experience of nature. You have to have the resources, which are not there these days, but that's a challenge for the city and a challenge for all of us, how to keep the next generation connected to nature. We live in the perfect place to do it.
Yeah. So, like I've said before, encourage anyone to go to the event next Wednesday evening. It's with the Winona Bird Club's putting it on, and I'm here talking to Richie Swanson. He's the president of the Bird Club. And Richie, you mentioned a little bit ago about their songs. Have you ever recorded any birds, or know anyone who does around the area?
No, I've read bird song I used to count birds by the song.
Okay.
In a 25-acre plot north of Minnesota City in the floodplain forest, and also in Perot Park, and also at Aghaming, I did point counts. So you learn the individual songs, but what birds are communicating, humanity really only knows the tip of the iceberg. They have sonograms. Computers create sonograms. Birds, we hear about 1/8 of the sounds that bird makes.
Oh, wow.
And actually, we don't see all the colors they see either. They have extra rods in their eyes to see more color than we do. So they're communicating in ways that just flies over our head.
Right.
And also, it's like, here's an example. Every robin sounds the same to you and me, but to robins, they're each singing an individual song, singing their names, so to speak. Oh. And say a cardinal on its nest, a female cardinal on its nest, a male is out gathering food, and he'll sing to the female, and the female will respond to him and tell him if it's safe to come or not. That's kind of a jump in interpretation,
Sure.
but they know that, sometimes the cardinal communicates and the male stays away, and sometimes the female cardinal communicates and it comes. There was a male redstart, a little warbler, who sang one song and got one female on the nest, and they moved far enough away so the first female didn't hear him, and then he sang a second song and got a second female on the nest, and then he moved a little farther away and sang a third song and got a third female on the nest, and did that a fourth time, and he took part in feeding every single nest. So they're tremendous athletes, birds are, and they're communicating all kinds of things that we just don't know. Like another bird that doesn't exist here, but a raven has what ornithologists think is an infinite vocabulary too.
Okay. So
it's really great. And to the cuckoo, which does nest at Aghaming, has a knocker call, kind of a wooden knocking that's fascinating, that calls its mate to the nest, and on and on. There's all kinds of verbal communication that goes on before mating and during mating rituals, and also to communicate with the young when the young are moving around the forest with their parents. So there's all kinds of things we don't know. A great book is the Science and Art of Birdsong by Donald Kreutzma is the kind of one expert in birdsong. I recommend that book.
Speaking of resources, you're a writer as well as a birder, correct?
Yeah.
So you have your blog. How can people find more of your work?
Well, they can go to richieswanson.com. And actually, speaking of the prothonotary warbler, the luminous gold warbler that nests in a stump in Aghaming, I wrote a creation story starring him, and American Athenaeum nominated it for a pushcart in 2013. That's at richieswanson.com. There's a bird studies tab, there's a myth tab, there's a short stories tab. My novel is First Territory. You can get it at Amazon and other places. So anything you want to know about me is at my website.
Okay, great. Well, I'm speaking with Richie Swanson. He's the president of the Winona Bird Club. Just a few more questions for you, Richie. How can people get involved with the Bird Club? Can they go online and sign up or find out more information? You
can friend us on Facebook. We're the Winona Bird Club on Facebook. Other than that, come to a meeting. First Wednesday of every month in October, we're having the Raptor Resource Project, which is kind of creating the gold standard for nest cams. They're based out of the Decorah. They do a lot of eagle nest cams and peregrine falcon work. So, and we meet in November, and then in December we have a Christmas count. You can take part in our Christmas count. We meet February, March, April, all at the Friendship Center, 7 o'clock, the first Wednesday of every month. And we also look in the press. We take walks together and we announce them in the press. So, but the best way is probably to, if you can't get to a meeting, contact us via the Facebook page.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, I'm here talking to Richie Swanson. Again, he's the president of the Winona Bird Club. and they're holding an event next Wednesday, September 4th at 7 p.m. at the Winona Friendship Center, and the event is called Beautifully Abundant Birds I Desire, and it's a really important topic, especially with there's a new agreement with Aghaming, and it involves the city of Winona and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and things are progressing now, so this event, Beautifully Abundant Birds I Desire, would be an important event to attend if you want to learn more about it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Richie.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll answer any question at the meeting if people are good enough to come.
Thanks, Richie.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Richie Swanson, president of the Winona Bird Club, for joining us today on Culture Clique. To learn more about the Winona Bird Club, just look them up on Facebook. To keep up on all things Winona and the surrounding area, tune into Culture Clique Thursdays at 12:30 right here on 89.5 KQAL. I'm Bill Stoneberg, and we've just heard from Richie Swanson, president of the Winona Bird Club, on Culture Clique.
Creating cultural awareness and understanding. You've been listening to Culture Clique. Support for Culture Clique is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Culture Clique is produced by KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University. For more information, look us up on the web at kqal.org. And thanks for listening to Culture Clique.
Are you interested in all things Winona and the surrounding area? Find podcasts of Culture Clique and all your favorite KQAL shows by going to kqal.org and looking for program archives under the Media tab. Culture Clique is made possible by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.